Welcome, Brian Tyler Cohen.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
I don't usually get to be on this side of it.
I know.
Usually you're the one asking me questions.
I know. It was very little preparation for the first time today.
I know. So let me start with the obvious question. What the hell happened?
Yeah, well, I think it was a combination of a few things. The first, I don't think we should understate, and that is the impact of the global environment that we're in right now. This is the first time, since 1905 where every governing party in the entire world lost ground in an election with regard to the governing party being in power. There wasn't a single governing party in the entire world that was spared from this, and the U.S. was no different. And I think that in large part is just owed to the fact that we had a global period of high inflation, and for a lot of people who don't pay attention to politics, which is our daily struggle here, trying to get people to pay attention. For a lot of those people, they just see high prices, they recognize that it was higher than it was last year at this time, and they want to punish the people in charge, and it's as simple as that. And then to bring forward a candidate, I think, who was part of the incumbent party, it's going to be a hard lift. It's going to be a heavy lift and a hard sell to convince people that if you want change, to elect somebody who is right now part of the administration that you're looking to punish. So that's a big portion of it. And frankly, I don't even know that I would feel comfortable saying that the best candidate in the entire world that we could have fielded would have been able to overcome those obstacles. The second part is that I think we were contending with a right-wing media ecosystem that we have not been able to build up any opposition for on the left, that was able to spread lies and disinformation every single day of this campaign from 5 a.m. on Fox and Friends all the way through the daily programming of podcasts, of which Republicans could completely dominate Democrats in, through television, whether it's Fox, OAN, Newsmax, other right-wing programming, whether it's YouTube or Rumble or TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, where Republicans dominate again. And so it doesn't really matter what the platform is, right-wing content dominates. And that is in large part owed to the fact that Republicans have laid hands and validated a lot of their right-wing creators, but Democrats don't have any answer for that. And more we've watched as Democrats, in office have conferred every ounce of validation onto the same mainstream media outlets that they then turn around 5 minutes later and criticize for doing both sidesism, or for not caring about democracy in the way that they should, or for not meeting the urgency of this moment. And I think that's kind of coming home to roost right now, where we have seen that this has been dubbed the podcast election, and we just don't have the podcast to be able to compete with what's happening on the right.
Yeah, I actually offered a similar critique, actually, but I want you to try this on for size because it's a little different. Which is, it is not that we don't have the podcasts. I mean, we don't have. You are correct as a factual number or numerical number, but I think that for too many Democratic candidates, they would rather go on Fareed Zakaria than they would on Brian Tyler Cohen. And by the way, this is not to knock, before we get angry mail. Fareed Zakaria is great. I watch Fareed Zakaria. Me and like probably 100,000 other people watch Fareed Zakaria, whereas millions of people watch your videos. And there is something, the media has built this this false gatekeeping in which they dub or they deem certain people journalists,
Yeah.
and other people not journalists. And Democrats, frankly, too often have gone along with that distinction.
I,
Rather
I
than,
do, by the way, I'm hesitant to say that I'm a journalist. I would rather call myself a YouTuber, a political commentator, for that exact reason.
but isn't it? But this is the thing. Like when people talk about like what Donald Trump did with Joe Rogan, they're to use a great phrase from the campaign that just ended, they are unburdened by what has been. You know what I mean? Like they're not sitting around worrying about like what bucket Joe Rogan falls into.
Right.
And it does feel to me like that is something that we have to contend with. That the fact is people get their news where they get their news. And there is no gatekeeping to that. There's no stamp of approval that matters to the people who are the consumers of the information.
Right. And I think it's also worth recognizing that for a lot of the outlets that Democrats have deemed legitimate enough to do interviews and break news on, they're talking to the same, not only the same faction of people, but those people are largely unpersuadable. If you're going on CNN or MSNBC or NBC or ABC, largely those viewers are going to be highly engaged, high information voters. There's going to be who are largely going to vote for Democrats. We've seen the breakdown in this election in terms of the where people get their information and who they're more predisposed to vote for. And people who do watch, legacy media, mainstream media, are by a large margin more predisposed to vote for Democrats. And so you're bringing sand to the beach, so to speak. You're talking to people who are already on board. And on top of that, it's a small number of people. So you're spending all of your time, again, conferring all of this legitimacy and validity onto these news outlets where you are talking to the same number of people. I mean, we've just seen the numbers come out where even primetime MSNBC is hitting a few 100,000 viewers, primetime MSNBC, and those numbers pale in comparison to what we see on YouTube now, for example. So you're speaking to a smaller audience. They are largely unpersuadable. And at the same time, there is also an opportunity cost for what the Democrats are doing when they go onto these outlets. And every opportunity that they use, not going on any show that is in the independent space, but rather going on the Fareed Zakarias of the world, going on ABC and CNN and CBS, whatever it is, that is one more opportunity that they didn't give an independent media outlet the opportunity to grow by virtue of doing an interview there, by breaking news there. Think about it this way. When was the last time you saw a Republican use mainstream media to break news or to do an interview?
Never.
It doesn't
No,
happen.
not recently. It doesn't happen.
They go on Breitbart. They go on Daily Wire. They lay hands on anybody with a microphone in front of them. And what that does then is that basically legitimizes them, validates them to their audience. And now those people can go out and be emissaries for the Republican Party because they've already gotten the stamp of approval from Donald Trump, who sat down with a ton of people, from Matt Gaetz or Jim Jordan, whoever it is. All of these people become emissaries, become evangelists for the party, and they've got the stamp of approval because those folks have showed up there. And so that's just the asymmetry at play between the two sides right now.
Yeah, I watched your the video you put out after the election. I agreed with everything you said except one thing. And so I got to ask about the one thing. You said basically if people need some time off, they should take some time off. If they need time away from the news, they should take time away from the news. And I worry about that, candidly. I worry that what's going to happen is you're going to have people who are going to say, you know what, I do need time off of this and I need to just not be around it. And in the meantime, Matt Gaetz is being nominated for Attorney General. You have, crazy people. Tulsi Gabbard is being nominated for Director of National Intelligence. And I wonder if in your effort to validate people's feelings, you aren't actually encouraging exactly the behavior we don't need, which is people just sort of, in a way, kind of preemptively obeying. They're just kind of disengaging.
It's a good point, and I think maybe in the day after the election, I underestimated how quickly we would be back in the thick of it and be back right in this hellscape that is the beginning of the Trump administration. Look, I think you and I have spent most of our time in the videos that we do, the Democracy Watch videos that we do together, begging and pleading people to stay engaged and stay focused on what's happening in politics. And I think we're seeing right now the importance for having an ecosystem that isn't quiet or that doesn't obey in advance, for example. And there is a lot of importance in making sure that when we have somebody like Matt Gaetz or as nominated as AG, or Tulsi Gabbard nominated as DNI, I think it's especially important that people do make sure that they are organizing in a way that and it doesn't have to be everything. We don't have to wage a fight on every single thing. And I don't want to fall into a trap of saying we're going to be the boy who cried wolf because everything is a 5-alarm fire. I think we do have to pick our battles, but we are already seeing with the seriousness of the topic of Matt Gaetz being nominated as AG, that there is a need for people to speak out. And by the way, for folks who think look, we've just gone through an election cycle where clearly that doesn't matter, clearly our voice doesn't have an impact, I would argue that from the minority, look at the power that we've been able to wield. Less than, in the last Trump administration, when the ACA was on the chopping block, from the minority, Democrats were able to put enough pressure on Republicans to the point where we were able to protect the ACA, which was the most vilified piece of legislation, in modern American history, basically, and protect it with Republican majorities. And so that kind of underscores the significance that even waging pressure campaigns from the minority can have. So I accept your criticism.
And everyone, Brian mentioned Democracy Watch. This is the ongoing series that Brian and I do on his YouTube channel. If you have not already subscribed to Brian's YouTube, you are missing, frankly, one of the most essential voices in American politics and certainly in the pro-democracy movement. When I had to make a decision where to spend my time and who to talk to, it was easy. It was with Brian, and I almost exclusively talk to Brian on YouTube. So please make sure you are subscribed to his channel. Please check out our Democracy Watch series, but check out everything on his channel because there are some great series. The link is above and in the show notes below. So tell me a little bit about what your plan is for your channel, which is gargantuan. You reach an enormous audience. But like, what is your plan moving forward in terms of, hopefully we'll keep doing Democracy Watch, but what, you really expanded your different offerings. What is your theory of the case moving forward?
So real quick, just as a side note, I think you deserve a major compliment here because you are also one of these major validating figures in the Democratic Party. I mean, you are the premier voting rights attorney in the United States, and when I came to you, that was a microcosm of exactly what I'm talking about right now. You didn't have to come onto YouTube like with some punk YouTuber, right? And to do a show and could have just continued talking to the gatekeepers in mainstream media, but your willingness to come do a show, it would confer a degree of validity to me and my channel that I didn't have before, and also gave us both the opportunity to reach a hell of a lot more people than you would have been able to reach, or than I would have been able to reach had we not had that series go. So it was a win-win, and I hope that it serves as something of a test case for other people to see that that there is a lot of virtue in being able to embrace independent media, even if it's not the glossy mainstream media that Democrats generally rely on. So I think that you deserve some recognition there. Now, in terms of the future of the channel, I do want to make sure. Look, I'm a small organization. It's just me and a few people here, and I have the
You're also a New York Times best-selling author. Let's not sell yourself short here.
So I have I have the benefit of being able to be a little bit more nimble, and this isn't like turning a cruise ship around. It's not like operating the DNC here. This is just like me and a few folks, and so I've noticed that we have a problem with young men in the Democratic Party, and we've largely ceded that ground to the right, and it feels so unbelievable to say, but I do think to a large degree that Democrats have lost culture, and to lose culture for young people is so not okay, especially when you consider the issues that actually impact young people: climate change, women's reproductive rights, gun safety. I mean, these are all issues that the left should be running away with. So, I'm going to try to pivot in some way that I can to be able to make my offerings, my show, more appealing to the very young people that we've lost. I think it's incumbent upon the Democrats to not continue reaching the exact same people on a daily basis and just solidifying. So everybody's got one vote, right? So like to solidify our support among the exact same people who already support us may feel good, but I think that the more important thing is to do whatever we have to do to reach new people, to bring more people in. This is a game of expanding our coalition and persuading new people. We've failed at that in this election. I think it's fine to take ownership of that. It's not some major concession to the right. I think we have to we gain nothing by burying our heads in the sand and pretending that we won here, or that it wasn't so bad. There are changes that we can make, and so I'm going to try to figure out what I can do on my channel to make it a little bit more appealing to folks who we need to reach out to based on what we saw at the end of this election cycle.
So let me ask you a question. You kind of alluded to this, and it's been rattling around in my brain since election day. Andrew Breitbart, you mentioned Breitbart, the guy who founded Breitbart, Andrew Breitbart, said that, and this is a paraphrase, but it's pretty close, that politics is downstream from culture. That we oftentimes on the left tend to flip that around and think what matters are the political issues, and that culture kind of is in the backdrop. But on the right, they flip that around, and at least in his estimation, that is the gating mechanism, is the culture thing. And I'm just curious if you think that that's right, or if you think that for Democratic voters, there's always going to be a more like they do, they do care about the issues. It's not going to just be culture.
It can be both, and I think for Democrats it is politics first, and that informs a lot of how they see the world. But clearly, for a lot of Republicans and young people in this country, it's not that way. It is culture first, and they have spent a lot of time grooming an entire generation of people into being fans of folks who can then serve as a gateway to right-wing politics. People who are watching Joe Rogan, people who are watching the Nelk Boys, people who consume content from Barstool Sports are not doing it because they're looking for politics
Right.
first commentary. They're doing it because they like that content. But then once they've built this fan base and nurtured an entire fan base by virtue of these people listening to them for hours and hours a day and becoming trusted voices for those people on culture, then when they introduce political commentary into their offerings, then that obviously is going to land way more significantly than if these people were politics first, because they're already trusted voices for these people. Joe Rogan is already talking to these people for 3, 4, 5 hours a day, and so of course it's going to be easier for them to take in whatever his political leanings are because they've trusted him on everything else. Same with the Nelk Boys, same with Barstool Sports, and so we have to kind of disabuse ourselves of this notion that it's not culture first. I think for the coalition of people that we have to reach out there, the contingent of people that we have to reach out there who aren't on our side, we have to change up, iterate our strategy here, because it can't just be beating them over the head with culture, beating them over the head with politics first, because that's not what's proving effective.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a conversation with Molly John Fast, who, I think is really smart on a lot of this stuff. And she said to me, how is it that we lost like the fitness crew, right?
Yeah.
Like somehow like all of the people who are into like bodybuilding and fitness and all that, who watch Joe Rogan and others for that, like somehow we lost them. Like how did Donald Trump wind up as the pro fitness candidate?
Yeah, I mean, on every facet, right? Like I mean, if you look at the metrics on which states are the healthiest, I don't think that looking at red states is going to really prove out your thesis, to make them the arbiters of what is healthy and what is not. But I think it's a testament to the fact that I think Democrats have ceded this ground, or maybe they've just, decided that because we have Hollywood and we have those people, we don't need influencers, so to speak, in the way that we've always trusted them on the left, because like, oh, well, we've got Beyonce, we've got Oprah, we've got these Hollywood types. But I think that more and more as we get deeper and deeper into influencer culture, it's less the Beyoncés, less the Oprahs, less the major recording artists and the Tom Cruises and the Brad Pitts of the world, and more just these people who are way more relatable, who are the Joe Rogans and the Nelk Boys and the
The Brian Tyler Cohens. Look, this is the thing. Like this is the thing. Like you say relatable, but you can enjoy Beyonce's music. But that is like literally what you are going to her for. And that's not to say, by the way, she shouldn't have opinions. She shouldn't speak out. I'm glad she did. And I'm one of the people who thought that and continue to think that event was worthwhile doing.
Yeah.
And the attacks against the campaign are mistaken, because getting attention in the presidential campaign is incredibly important. So I think that the criticism of the Harris campaign for spending money on big events, I think is misguided. Yeah. But I think though that Joe Rogan is not selling himself as a larger than life figure. He is selling himself as someone who people listen to banter and talk with. And so oftentimes when you have these very A-list celebrities, like that just isn't how people experience them, right? People tune into you because they want to hear you talk. They want to hear your opinion. And so there is a head start that folks like you have in reaching people, because they are not tuning into you for your singing. Now they are tuning into you to hear what you are saying about Laura Trump's music career.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
and you will never hear me speak an ill word of the esteemed Laura Trump when it
The
comes to
soon to be Senator Laura Trump, by the way.
apparently, because we live in hell, because we haven't gotten enough bad news lately. Apparently, we're going to have Senator Lara Trump from Florida. But I think you're right. I think we've got a head start in terms of what people are open to hearing from the influencers as opposed to the celebrities, for example, because they're not going to them for their political opinions. They're not going to them for any opinions. Really, they're going to them for what they do and what they're good at. But I think that, again, like the left, I think it's incumbent on us then to recognize that we are not being that we can't just put all of our eggs in the basket of these celebrities or musical artists or musicians, whatever it is, and we can't put all of our eggs in the basket that is mainstream media, or any of these highly esteemed publications, because that's not how people consume content these days. That's not where people are going to inform their political decisions or their ideology these days. And we do have to, the fact is, this is the influencer economy that we're in right now, and so it's incumbent on everybody on the left to do whatever they can to build up that class of people, so that we're, again, not left flat-footed in 26 or 28.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the beginning of the 2026 election cycle. Here we are. It's like the movie Groundhog Day. The alarm clock goes off, and like we're Bill Murray waking up. Um, everyone's licking their wounds right now, and Donald Trump is doing things that are proving that he is Donald Trump, and I think will quickly turn himself into being a pretty divisive and unpopular figure.
Well, you don't ascribe to the new tone that we're about to hear from Donald Trump any day now, right around the corner.
Exactly. Um, so should Democrats come out of the chute quickly, or should they let him flounder for a while? In other words, is this a quick political transition forward, or should this be a slow transition forward?
That's a really good question, and I think there's no way to answer that without seeing what happens first. I alluded to the fact before that I do think we should pick our battles. I don't think there's going to be the same, women's march, pussy hat, like the whole thing, like there was in 2017. And I really would caution Democrats from thinking, because there is a lot of exhaustion that people have to contend with, and so I would caution against like going right out the barrel and expecting people to have the same degree of fight. I do think that we have to pick our battles wisely, and again, this is what I said earlier in this chat right here, is to not think that people are going to be willing to fight every single thing tooth and nail, because then, I mean, that doesn't help us either, right? If we are just fighting everything and everything seems like a five-alarm fire, and then kind of nothing seems like a five-alarm fire. So I do think it's worth it to pick our battles. I do think that Matt Gaetz as AG is a battle worth picking. I do think that Tulsi Gabbard as DNI is a battle worth picking. The others, I'm not so sure. I think that sure, you can vote it. You can, if you have members of the Senate who want to vote against them, I think that's fine. But I do think that it's worth focusing on being more deliberate about what our battles are, and putting our energy toward that, so that we don't seem so scattered, that we do seem more organized, and that we can actually get something done. We know what the Trump administration is like. We know what Trump is like, where he throws so much shit against the wall
Right.
that it's impossible
Right. That's
to
his
tolerate.
strategy, right? His strategy is to make us not pick battles, but to just have there be so many things going on.
Right, and the sad reality is that things will fall through the cracks that 10 years ago, or 20 years ago rather, would have been completely disqualifying. But at the same time, that's the political reality we live in right now. Donald Trump is very much subscribing to the Steve Bannon mentality of flooding the zone with shit. And so I do think that there is a lot to be said for Democrats figuring out how to organize and figuring out which battles are worth taking on.
I have identified, not surprisingly, since I'm a lawyer who litigates, that right now the fact is that President Biden is still nominating judges. We are getting them through the Senate. There actually, by the time he leaves office, there will actually be more judges in the federal judiciary appointed by Democrats than by Republicans. I continue to think that the courts, in a world in which Republicans control both houses of Congress and the presidency, the courts are vitally important. I hear a lot of Democrats talk about, and I don't dismiss this, the role of governors, that Democratic governors, J.B. Pritzker, I think is doing a great job in Illinois. He just announced something with, I think, Jared Polis. governor of your, I won't say your home state, your current home state.
Yeah.
Gavin Newsom is talked about being in the, taking steps to fight Donald Trump. Where do you think the fights come? Do you think it's at the state level? Do you think it's in the courts? Do you think we see an emerging class in Washington D.C.? Like, where are you focused on for the opposition?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'm not sure that I have an answer to that yet, but I think it's going to be D, all of the above, to be perfectly honest. I think a lot of eyes are going to be on the courts, and unfortunately, I think that Republicans do have an advantage in that A, they judge shop, which
Yeah.
you've spoken about extensively on Democracy Docket, and B, the final arbiter of all things legal and judicial is the U.S. Supreme Court. So I think at the end of the day, Republicans have a major advantage in terms of having Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito being the final arbiters of anything that they want to push through on the judiciary front. So there is going to be that. At the same time, the states, I think, are going to be probably the biggest hotbed of resistance against the Trump administration. I think if we do see, I do think the first fight is probably going to be something along the lines of deportation, and I don't think that Democratic governors are going to just allow federal agents to, destroy families and by the way, destroy the economy, because who do they think does the work of agriculture, of construction? I mean, like the ramifications on our economy are going to be massive. So I don't think that they'll just sit idly by and watch that happen. And then of course we'll see the usual resistance from folks in government. But unfortunately, being in the minority means you have very little agency. It's gonna be much, and I think this was an allusion to what we were speaking about before, but people are going to have way more power than I think even the lawmakers and the senators in the minority are going to have. It's going to be on us to wage these pressure campaigns if we want to protect healthcare, for example, if we want to protect women's reproductive rights, for example, if we want to protect immigrants, for example. There's going to be very little that these lawmakers can do, and I think it becomes more incumbent on folks who are actually in the majorities in the states to stand up to what's happening in the Trump administration, and then largely just the American people more broadly.
All right. So, last question I have for you is, you recently announced you are on Twitch. So,
Yes.
my son, years ago said, Dad, you should be on YouTube. And I was like, like, what am I going to do on YouTube? Then I met you, and like, lo and behold, I'm on YouTube. He also said to me at the same time, he's like, you should do, actually, he said Reddit. And I was like, that doesn't seem like a great idea. And I've kind of warmed to Reddit.
Yeah.
And he said Twitch,
Yeah.
which, to be honest with you, I don't want people to like tune out if they are big Twitch fans. I've never been on Twitch. I don't even fully understand. It sounds like a very long form of YouTube.
Yeah.
And then in the last few days, everyone's like, get off of X, which I totally understand that, because that's actually the only social media really that I've been on regularly over time. I got off of Facebook years ago and never really been on Instagram much. So they're all talking blue sky. They were talking Threads, now they're talking blue sky. So as the guy who is now telling me you're on Twitch, and I hope this is even the right language. I hope everyone follows you on Twitch, or
that's
does
perfect.
whatever one does on Twitch to find you. But what do you make of the social? And obviously you're enormous on YouTube. You're a YouTube star. So like, how do you make sense of everything I just laid out at your feet?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely in the midst of kind of a realignment online, and I think that Threads missed a major opportunity to be a replacement for Twitter, because the folks at Meta weren't willing to be courageous enough to even allow political content to not be throttled. So there's no growth on Meta, and if you have, or on Threads, and if you're someone like me whose main concern is persuasion, you can't do that by talking to the same exact people on a daily basis. Very hard to persuade people when they're already on your side. Talk about bringing sand to the beach. And so Blue Sky doesn't have that problem. And I do think that, look, those on the left and hopefully in large part in the center are probably not going to be too inclined to support a platform like Twitter, where it's just become a cesspool of the most vile things that you could possibly read on the internet. I mean, it's not dissimilar to what we used to look at 4chan and being like
Right.
the deepest bowels of the internet and like the corners, and like you just knew those people existed. Now they're just out in the open. And so that's what Twitter has devolved into. And I think that we have competition now with Blue Sky, and I do think that there is something to be said for people migrating over there. But look, I mean, I explained earlier how I think it's more important to reach young guys. Twitch is a much younger demographic. The content is different. It's much longer form. And my
Can you
whole
explain to people like me who have never been on it? It's like
yeah.
my son says it's like YouTube, but it goes on for hours.
Yes, and so it's streaming, and
Okay.
so a lot of my content is very produced and I had always taken the tack of like how can I get the most information out in the shortest period of time. That was always my through line with the content that I create, because I know people are busy, and this is how I can get them the most important information delivered as efficiently as possible. Twitch turns that on its head. So you basically stream. You can just do just chatting, which is what I do, or you can do it while you play video games, for example. It's big in like gamer culture. I don't play video games, so I can just sit there and chat, which is also fine. And I've been streaming every single day on Twitch, and I average about an hour and a half streams, which is for me, who again specializes in like 10-minute videos, is is really testing the limits of my patience and endurance and my throat. But I've even asked like the folks who follow me on Twitch. I'm like, I'm doing an hour and a half stream. I'm like, is this normal? And they're like, this is short. So people sit there for 3, 4 hours and just listen to these streamers, sometimes longer, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours, just streaming all day long, and people just sit there and listen. And like when we think to how the Joe Rogans of the world become so persuasive and so important, it's because this is the viewing and listening habits of so many people out there. I mean, Twitch is
I know.
a
I heard he
massive,
does interviews that are 3 hours long.
yeah, that's what it is. And so this is people's listening habits. And I think the pendulum has swung, because I think a lot of us look at like this as TikTok culture, right? Where if you
Right.
don't have you just if you haven't gotten your point across, if you haven't captured the attention of people in the first 2 seconds, they're scrolling away, they're at the next video. But I think out of that, or you know kind of as a contrast to that, we've also seen a lot of people that are willing to not only give the 2 seconds it takes to consume a full to decide whether they want to consume 30 seconds of content on TikTok. There are people who are sitting there for hours and hours and hours consuming content, and think about how that informs somebody's worldview. Think about how that informs somebody's cultural outlook, and by extension, think about how that informs somebody's political ideology when you have those people who they're sitting with for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day. And so, yeah, I mean, it's this has been like a new thing for me, but I'll stick with it, because however I can be the most helpful to the movement more broadly, I think there is a major absence of people on the left doing that kind of thing. So if that's how I can be helpful, that's what I'm going to do.
Well, Brian Tyler Cohen, thank you for everything you do, and make sure, like I said, everyone, if you are not subscribed to his YouTube channel, and even if you are, you should go check out his most recent videos. It is the one place I go where I always watch. I won't say watch every one of your videos. I watch all of your guest videos. I watch Tim. I watch you with Glenn. I watch your long form interviews. It's really, there's something there for everyone. And if you're, maybe this will be inspiration for you to get on Twitch, but if you're on Twitch, make sure you are following Brian on Twitch as well as on all other social medias. We'll put all the links to all of Brian's social media from YouTube on down in the links here. And Brian, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, and thank you guys for the work that you do at Democracy Docket.